This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 20th, 2023 meeting of the North Haven Board of Finance. I'd like to call the meeting to order. All right, we have a relatively short agenda, but let's start with the minutes as usual. Any comments on the minutes, please?
Yeah, I have just a point of clarification. I wondered if everyone could turn to page 2 of the meeting minutes from our August meeting, and take a look at the paragraph that begins, Mr. Frieder summarized the financial outcome of fiscal year 2022-2023. Down at the bottom of that paragraph, it said, revenue fell short by $869,012 due to the mistaken inclusion of federal ESSER funds and the recognition of the full budgeted grants for municipal projects line item. So the first part, the ESSER funds, I understand. The second part, I just wondered if you could clarify exactly what that means.
Mr. Frieder, if you'd like me to help at all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if that's worded exactly correctly, but go ahead, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah. In the past, we've only recognized the amount of grants for municipal projects that was utilized as operating expenses within a given budget. And because this year, in 22-23, we have elected to accept and recognize the entire amount of over $2 million, that had a direct effect on the figure of $869,000 of being short. Otherwise, we would have been short well over $2 million. So that's just a note to us and to others that that was a major influence on what that 869 figure represents.
Well, the way it's written, it seems like the way that we are recognizing the MRSA revenue actually caused us to have a shortfall, when in fact it's just the opposite.
No, it just caused the shortfall to be only $869,000. So I was just, but certainly if for any clarification purposes you have a suggestion on how to clarify that, that's fine. But I just wanted to note that we did accept the entire $2 million plus as a revenue item, and that had an effect on what the recorded figure was, what the recorded balance was in revenues.
All right, I have a suggestion. I do understand the confusion. We've got in one line an explanation, partial explanation for the shortfall, which was the federal ESSER funds, but then on the other side, we're not really talking about the shortfall, we're talking about additional income. My suggestion,
How about despite? You want to say despite?
My suggestion is we merely end the sentence after the word ESSER funds and delete the rest, because this is not a full, complete discussion of last year. It's just a short recitation of the conversation that happened. My other suggestion, Tammy, is that in the parenthetical where it says per Board of Finance approval, I think we should say pending future Board of Finance approval.
Well, all right. I did want to try to include in the minutes a change in policy.
Well, I think if you want to do that, Mike, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it should be a separate sentence, because we're mixing up the expenses and the income.
I completely agree.
Instead of the word and, the word despite could be there, but otherwise it can be a period after funds, and you're right that could be a separate sentence.
Yeah,
So here's my suggestion.
Just flip the sentence around.
If you solely want to make mention of the change, could you give some language to Tammy, please, after the meeting or in the subsequent days here?
Yeah.
And
But we have to agree on it, right? Don't we? Before. and then vote on it?
We could agree to give Mike some latitude, or we could agree in the exact language.
So something like, despite the recognition of the full budgeted grants for municipal projects line, which brought in $2.2 million, revenue fell short by $869.12 due to the mistaken inclusion of the federal ESSER grant funds, something like that. Is that
No,
acceptable?
I don't have an objection to that.
Okay.
So Mike, can you handle that for us, please?
Yes.
And Tammy, would you mind editing that one edit I had?
And what's the other change you wish?
I just think
Yes.
because it's on the agenda for tonight, Mike, on the parenthetical, where it talks about the unspent funds of the BOE, it says per Board of Finance approval. I think we should just say it's pending future Board of Finance approval. It's on the
Yes,
agenda tonight.
okay.
Right. And I'd actually like to address that very point, if I could as well, in our meeting minutes. And again, this pertains to the handout that we received, which shows a total surplus for the combined town and Board of Ed of $184,268.47. So I agree that there was an error when we created this budget of including ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, which together was $1 million on a revenue line item to
I'm
support
not trying to be
the
rude,
budget.
Nancy, but can we wrap up the minutes if you want? And-
Yes, yes, so
Okay.
let me get
Sorry,
to that.
go ahead.
However, that error was actually completely compensated by other sources of revenue that we brought in, such as the total town revenue general and the total town revenue departments. So that is kind of a moot point, because we brought in over $1 million, just an extra $1 million from those two line items. I believe that there are two omissions from the explanation of the final surplus that I think need to be addressed. One is Mr. Frieda's decision to forego collection of cash surplus appropriated or debt reserve to the tune of $290,000, as well as the special revenue fund transfer of $550,000 for a total of $840,000 in revenue that we did not collect in the last fiscal year. So that's point number one, and that's on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, I believe the accounting of the BOE unexpended funds of $441,035 is in fact the unexpended funds from the end of the fiscal year for the Board of Ed. So transferring that money doesn't necessarily morph it into an expenditure. It's still a transfer. It's still a surplus. We can't vote on transferring something that doesn't exist. So I think we first have to recognize and declare it as a surplus, then transfer it into this non-relapsing fund with a Board of Finance vote, in which we acknowledge a town surplus of $1 million and a Board of Ed surplus of $441,000 for a total of $1.4 million, which is exactly what was included in this spreadsheet. However, it was reduced by the handling of the BOE surplus. So I think that it's very important that we have this be an accurate document, because in the end, the net result is $1.4 million surplus, not $184,000. That's a difference of $1.2 million. And so again, I think for both the purpose of the meeting minutes as well as for the public understanding the end of the fiscal year, that one was a choice by Mr. Frieda in terms of the collection of a source of revenue, and the other is an accounting practice that I think together have resulted in a bottom line figure that I do not believe is an accurate reflection of the end of year closeout. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, so let me take the first part of that.
Sure.
You heard me say at the last Board of Finance meeting when the auditor was here, we have discretion on not utilizing the money that was budgeted specifically from the debt service and the special revenue report, or the special revenue fund. The auditor confirmed that. And the reason that we didn't do it, because it would be reckless for us to do it. You may say, what do you mean, Mike, reckless? Because that would have exhausted those funds significantly. To take it out and use it would have been reckless, because by keeping it in, we now have the money that we can use for this coming fiscal year, particularly with police purchases that we may need, or whatever was in that special fund that we didn't take the money out. So we've kept it for this year for expenditures that we may need, that we didn't need to calculate in the last fiscal year. We have the discretion, ladies and gentlemen. I said it. I do this every day here in town. Every day we work on the finances. So we know what we can do and we know what we can't do. The auditor confirmed it. There was no reason to use that special revenue money when we didn't need to. It would have exhausted the fund and put us in a very bad position if we needed an expenditure this fiscal year, because the money wouldn't have been there.
But, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but first of all, this is the first time we've ever done this, so it's not like this has been a practice that's happened year after year. And second of all, if by acknowledging receipt of that cash surplus budgeted money, it's simply added to the total calculation of surplus, it would just go back into the general fund at the end. So how are we depleting the general fund? We're just accurately reflecting the revenue that we budgeted for in that budget cycle.
Well, you know, you heard,
I guess given that, what are we arguing over?
what's the point then? So the money, if
The point is to say that the surplus was $1.4 million, not $184,000.
but the fact we didn't use the money, the surplus is 184, the money's still there. So it's almost a moot point, folks.
Well, again, I believe that the very intelligent people who you'll be meeting with next month for the AAA, for the bond rating, or sorry, for the evaluation of our overall finances, will certainly be able to see that we have this fund balance in part because you did not recognize a source of revenue in the last fiscal year.
And they will be delighted to see it.
Okay, we're.
I thought they were delighted to
Okay,
see
if I
surpluses.
could,
Yeah.
we're talking about the minutes. If there's a specific recommendation for a change in the wording, we need to crystallize that, so A, the members can vote if necessary, and B, so Tammy can record it if it gets passed by this committee.
Okay, we
So,
can speak to additional changes in a minute, but I do want to make a motion to amend by adding the word, changing per to pending Board of Finance approval, and reversing the sentence around as discussed earlier. So making the changes that were mentioned earlier, that's my motion.
I'll second your motion. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'd also like to make a motion that we add language that says that the $184,000 was also due to the decision to only collect 57.5% of the total cash surplus.
I'll second for discussion, though we've had quite a bit of discussion. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Nay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
All those opposed?
Sorry, all those in favor, yes. Aye.
All right, so we have one in favor, Ms. Barrett. All those opposed, please repeat. Opposed.
Opposed.
Motion does not pass.
And what about the issue of the Board of Education in terms of how we're handling this surplus and whether we're calling it zero or we're actually calling it a surplus of $441,000? Because if you actually recognize that for what it is, then that number is also incorrect, the 184,260.
May I comment on something?
Please.
Please.
When we received our reports, the reason that we expensed it out is like, for example, what the auditor said, they had already expensed out the $441,000.
Yes,
So
and-
the report shows a zero.
There was a lot of confusion in our last meeting about that very point, and so it was certainly not as crystal clear as it seems to be presented here in these meeting minutes. I don't think anyone understood why they expensed it out before we had even voted on it.
Right, but as the final, they had already expensed it out, and you can't show a surplus if they already expensed it out.
Well, then, if they're not showing a surplus, we have nothing to vote on. Right? It's kind of a catch-22. If they're gonna show a $0 at the end of the fiscal year, then we have no money to transfer.
Well, it's sort of like they put in a suspense account, a holding account,
Yeah, I mean,
conditional on our approval. And because it's designated that way and will certainly be spent, I just wanted certainly the minutes and any financial statement on last year to recognize the amount of Board of Education funds that are unspent. Also to recognize the reversal of those unspent funds in terms of designated usage, probably for capital items. And so if the public wants to know how much is going into the unappropriated fund balance at the end of the year, based on the budget outcome, the figure, $184,260, I believe, is approximately the correct figure. So that's why the minutes are written the way they are, and the summary of the end of the year outcome shows that as the bottom line.
But a transfer is not an expenditure. They didn't spend a single penny of that money in the last fiscal year. It's simply moved
Right.
from their account to this 373 account.
Okay, well, under expenditures, it does show that the Board of Education had $441,000 at the end of the year. So that figure is in there. So that's what's noted, and I think that's the recognition that it deserves.
But that's not what the Board of Education reports say. They're saying $0. And
Right.
we are reversing that, but with putting it in parentheses, the exact same amount.
Right.
Which effectively does the same thing, right?
It's how the
It's calling a transfer an expenditure,
it's how
which it is not.
It's how the memorandum of understanding was written.
look, they notified us last month they were going to ask this money be transferred. I think it's going to be pretty clear to anyone who's watching this meeting tonight, since this item is on the agenda, that, at least with a successful vote, the money will be moved over. You know, it's going to be, it's an expense designated, there is a listing, by the way, that we got of where they want to spend the money.
Yes, that was their good faith requirement.
Correct.
Yes.
So I'm comfortable with, I understand what you're saying, Nancy, but I'm comfortable with the presentation that they gave us. And I don't think there's any lack of transparency. I think everyone in this room, and I think people at home understand, we've talked about this MOU and this fund for many months now, and we talked about it last meeting, and it's going to be discussed again tonight. So I guess what I would say is, since we've spent 25 minutes on the minutes here, if there's a specific recommendation you have for the minutes, I think we should offer it. Okay. Motion to approve the minutes as amended. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Abstain.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I'd like to abstain from that vote
Why are you abstaining?
because I don't agree with it.
Well, then you should vote no.
Okay, I vote no.
All right, thank you. All right, the only thing under old business is that, it says none, I know, but there was a request to have the MRSA money, the ins and outs, you know, the beginning balance and so on, over time and get down to what the balance is right now. The Finance Department is working on that. It is not yet fully completed. They do expect to have it for us at next month's meeting. All right, why don't we move on to the item 3, new business. Let's start with revenue, please. My only comments are that I think you probably all noticed that we did very well in building fees, fire fees, and paramedic fees during the month. Ingrid, I guess, as far as questions, my only question was, The payment in lieu of taxes, we got in 155, not this month, year-to-date. Does that come in 2 tranches during the year, do you know?
Yes.
It does?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was exactly my question.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
Other than that, any other questions from the floor?
I don't think so.
Seems quiet.
Yep. Well, you highlighted the big items, and
Okay.
this is a new fiscal year, so there's not much action.
Let's move on to expenses. Again, my thoughts are, I did look them over. I'm sure there'll be a couple questions, but what I saw anyways, was that in some departments, the commodity-type items are escalating: oil and gas, office supplies, maintenance of buildings, and in 1 or 2 cases, I think, equipment. Those are sort of the common things I've seen. There are some other outliers, and people may have some questions, but I guess thematically, that's what I saw. I'll open up to the floor.
Well, printing, page 4. Seemed to be up there, or,
What department, Diane, please?
buildings. Printing, it looks like they've pretty much used most of it. So I
yeah.
don't know if they, I don't know, I don't think they front-loaded, or maybe there's just, a lot of people want paper, I don't really know.
This is building inspection.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
There is an encumbrance. It's a small dollar, and I think it's probably weighted by the fact that the dollars are so small. It's an easy item, I'm sure, to go over and distort the percents, my guess is.
Other than that, I mean, we had some maintenance contracts we paid. There was a few things that we pay ahead of time.
Yeah, there's certain items that we
Yeah.
pay at the beginning of the
Yeah.
fiscal year.
Yeah, there was maintenance, and there was something else, I can't remember it now.
Or radio maintenance and repair, we,
Yeah.
That's a one-time fee.
I figured that, yeah.
Yeah, oh, software, I think I
licenses,
saw
yeah.
some software.
Yes.
IT mostly.
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
them
you have
are.
to pay that
Some
ahead.
contracts,
Yeah.
3 years, and I
Yep.
spoke to him about that, his line won't go over.
Yep.
He
That's all I
manages
really
it
saw,
that way.
by looking at it at this early stage of the process for this year.
All right, thank you, Diane. Any other members have some questions or comments?
No, I
Yes,
saw the same things that you just brought up, Tim.
Okay. Sorry, Nancy, did you have something?
Yes, on page 7, I think we've asked this, if it's not too much trouble, but it seems like we frequently get, for central facilities, maintenance and repairs of town buildings, and maintenance of, and repair of rental properties. We frequently see, big ticket items like $27,000 and big encumbrances. Is there any way that we could get a report that kind of breaks down some of those repeat offenders that we see on a pretty regular basis that seem to be kind of a mystery item? And we certainly don't expect to put you or Mr. Frieda on the spot, but it might be helpful to have a sense for those kinds of things,
For maintenance
what's
and
breaking.
repair of town buildings is usually like our preventive maintenance contracts. We have some repairs at the gym door. There was an AC repair for $2,000. What else?
And do we have any rental buildings besides the one next to the fire department? Is there just one, or is there more than one in town?
For rental,
We have 3?
yes.
So, yeah, look, I mean, if you want the report, we can do that. We can certainly explain it here, what happens, And, it's not a situation where there's an offense. What happens
No.
is, in running, you mentioned repeat offenders, but it's nothing to do with that. What it has everything to do with, it's like our homes. Sometimes these things pop up. We had no anticipation we're gonna have an air conditioning problem at 17 Broadway. We gotta fix these things when they come up. That's what happens here, so. And they're almost impossible to predict.
Right.
And down the bottom of that same page, under assessor, the vision appraisal software, we're up at 85%. And I looked at it from last year, the entire year, I think we spent only $8,000 on that particular line item, which left, $21,000 unexpended. And so, this really seems to be a big jump, all in one lump sum. And I understand we're approaching a reval year, but unless we are using, having some sort of fee for usage each time, I don't understand how an appraisal software would,
That might be a
Jump so
fee
much.
for a couple of years. I'll look into that, but we did
Okay.
have a software support fee for $19,000 and a GIS support subscription for $8,000. But I can look into that more for
Yeah,
you.
to me, it looked like there was some kind of upgrade too. I mean, when you do any kind of upgrade, it may or may not be in your contract.
right.
I did look at it, but I made that assumption based
Yeah.
on the fact that this number is really that high.
And on page 8, under police, I just had a general question. This is first, just the structure of their budget. How, I know it's a new building, but how does the police department account for the costs of building maintenance? So I see that they have building supplies. Does that also include any minor repairs that they need to do, or is that just straight purchases of?
Supplies, like if they
It's
need
pure
anything for the
supplies,
building.
okay.
Yes.
So how do they account for any repairs that need to be done?
The repairs, maintenance,
Of
and equipment.
Yeah.
That's a 430 line.
Okay, so that equipment is equipment in the building as opposed to equipment that they, use on a daily
Building
basis?
supplies.
Wouldn't it be under heat and heating
have-
plant
yeah.
maintenance?
Well, again, that would be kind of one type, but I just wasn't sure if there was anything else, because most other departments do have kind of a building maintenance
Supplies.
line.
No, I have to look into it. Hold on.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. All right, so again, within police, since this was an issue last year, there seemed to be, at least in the month of August, a big jump in overtime. In July, it was only 23.9 thousand, and in August, it jumped up to 62, which again, it's by no means a crisis. It certainly is something that we can handle, but it is something to just keep an eye on. And then we have on page, still under police, but on the next page, on 9, is the, this ever elusive water line item, which again is now up to almost 50%. So,
I did check into
I-
that.
I
They
don't know
have
why.
The last 3 months, we have really high bills.
mhm.
And we're looking to see if there's a meter problem or anything. We are looking into that.
Right. And vehicle maintenance and repairs, again, up to 73%, and building supplies up to almost 75%. So,
The
405.
vehicle maintenance and repairs.
yeah,
That was, there's a contract for the live 911 for the vehicles, that's $10,000, and there were just other repairs. But mostly it's encumbrances amount.
so it's
Sometimes they
both.
just do,
and then building
other repairs.
supplies, again,
Building
a big,
supplies.
big, expense and combined with an encumbrance. I guess
Right.
I'm most concerned about the percentage,
Right.
which reflects both.
that is high. I will look into that.
Okay.
Ingrid, actually, I noticed that item too, but do we have a central, I mean, when the departments buy supplies, common supplies, do we have a central,
We have a central line for office supplies,
okay,
but they also have, but building supplies is their own line.
okay, so
Right,
they don't go through, say, the finance department to requisition, something like that?
No.
Again, that might be a source of savings.
Unless there was a
for-
major repair that had to
Yeah,
get done and then, right.
Right.
Okay.
I should point out that the overall police budget is 13.3%,
Yep, well,
right in line with time elapsed. so.
absolutely. No, I think overall, they're doing a great job. I just, wanted to highlight those two things, or 3 things, I guess. And then, unless somebody else wants to jump in.
No, go ahead, finish up.
Something on page 10, under the fire department. Again, for fire, you have to look at both overtime and contractual replacement staffing as kind of 2 separate things, whereas the police department is just overtime. But once again, contractual replacement staffing in July for the fire department was only $35,000, and then in August, it jumped up to $78,000. which again, at this point in the fiscal year, we can definitely handle it, but I'm just trying to keep an eye on not just overtime and contractual replacement staffing, but those figures in the numerator with full-time expenditure in the denominator. And so if you look at the three different departments, police is at 14%, animal control is at 36%, and I believe fire is at 28%. So again, just something to
I
keep
guess
in
my
mind.
comment here is similar to police would be that, contractual replacement staff and overtime probably aren't particularly linear, but 78,000 on a pro rata basis is exactly on budget. And in fact, they're well below budget, in fact, for the year.
Plus, the fire department's at 16.9%, time elapsed 16.7%. Entire department versus time elapsed.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned when I see numbers that, change pretty dramatically from month to month, but also when I look at that last column of percentages, so things like medical supplies, at the rate that they're going, with a $21,000 encumbrance, that line item will be $200,000 by the end of the year. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Frieda, if you've had a conversation with the chief about what can be done in order to address this ballooning expense, and I
Well-
don't doubt it at all.
I guess Mike could comment. I guess when I saw that, because I did highlight it as well, Nancy, my assumption may be incorrect, but that, we order supplies in bulk, I'm assuming, right? It is 21,000 is the encumbrance, right? So,
They're not recurring expenses.
yeah,
Yeah, like,
right.
Yeah, it was zero actually for last month, but it was 12,000 year-to-date, meaning just for the month of July. And then there's a $21,000 encumbrance. So I'm assuming that there's, it's somewhat cyclical.
There's
meaning-
some one-time yearly fees, and then there were some encumbrances for purchases.
I mean, absent the encumbrance, that line would be on budget.
Right. So the encumbrances tend to get smoothed out because they're not monthly encumbrances. So I have no concerns here at all. Because the bottom line, folks, is by the end of this fiscal year, we're not going to be overexpending this budget. There's always these vicissitudes within the budget, lines over, lines under. And we manage it every day here, not just once a month. Every day we manage this.
Nancy, did you have any others?
Yeah, on page 12, this sort of relates to what you were talking about earlier in terms of gas and oil for both sanitation and streets and roads. It looks like the year-to-date and month-to-date expended are exactly the same number. So is there some sort of stockpile of gas and oil that's left over from the previous year that we didn't have to have any expenditure for the first month of the year?
I'm assuming we just paid the bill, right? That's what it is?
Yeah, it's the
Right. That's all. It's
timing
just
of
the
the
timing of
bills.
the bill, right?
Yes.
But again, the way that this is written,
It's accurate.
there was nothing in July,
No,
and
it
then-
just means we didn't pay the bill in July. We may have used some oil and gas, we didn't pay the bill until August.
As an example, in the third week of July, if we had to fill the tanks, we wouldn't have paid the bill until August.
Right.
Can't pay the bill until it gets there.
and then the August bill wouldn't arrive until
It
September.
depends on timing.
Yeah, it depends on timing.
I don't
It's a
understand.
timing
Well,
thing.
time.
Okay.
When a bill comes in, we don't pay it that day. We have 30 days to pay the bill.
Okay. Again, it's just something that was repeated in two different departments the exact same way, where we have a year-to-date expended and the month-to-date expended that are exactly the same numbers. So that's why I thought that was a little unusual. That's not something we see with other things. And then on page 13, again, this is still streets and roads. The question of materials and supplies and line painting, are these things that are related to the paving? Because I would think that that would be covered by the $2 million bonding.
They are supplies that they need to purchase for preparation for paving, and there was some guardrail replacements and other supplies.
I don't know if this is accurate or not, Nancy, but I do know that when we do roads in town, it's Public Works that changes out the storm drains. That's, I'm assuming, outside the contract for the streets and roads, and this could be an example, I'm not really sure, but I do have noticed that.
That's exactly what happens. We have to prep all the roads before Tilcon comes in.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think the last question that I have is on page 14, related to the track and field facility maintenance. I'm just wondering, how many months of the year are they actually contracted to maintain that field?
This is the, I have to look into it.
Okay.
Well, it's
gotta be-
But it's
12.
seasonal,
It's an annual
right.
contract.
You gotta cut the grass.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a 12-month contract, and, unless there's some snow on the ground, they're not gonna go out there and cut grass. So what we see there is, the first
The
installment on the
governments of the
contract.
contract, right.
Right, yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand whether the $80,000 is spread out uniformly over 12 months, or it's only really during the months in which we can use that field.
It's an annual
It is
contract.
within, yeah.
It's an annual contract, okay, so it is smoothed out over 12 months, okay. And Mike, are we paying the Greater New Haven Transit dues on page 15? It doesn't look like we are, and I wondered if that was based on some plan to acquire vans or something?
No, it has nothing to do with acquiring vans. It's probably just because we haven't been billed yet and haven't made the payment,
I see,
so.
for the senior center, okay. All right, that's all I have.
All right, how about the other members? Any questions from the other members?
Sir, just want to know what is the schedule for paying our making our bond payments on page 18? Just want to know what to expect that line to go up and down with throughout the year.
We have like 2 more this year, but it should be right on track. It's
Right on.
sometime, this year happened to be the bulk of it was at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I know some things expenses are front-loaded. Okay.
They're generally quarterly or semi-annual payments, correct,
Yeah.
Ingrid?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It wouldn't really correlate to the quarterly, but okay. Whatever you say.
No, it could.
It could?
Sometimes you only pay once a year, Mike.
Yeah, it's
Depends
either-
on the-
Yeah, it
It depends on the
Yeah,
bond.
it's either one, it's either.
Right, so it wouldn't be quarterly, it'd be once a year.
No,
Or-
we have more than one bond,
Right,
Mike.
right.
We have lots of bonds.
Oh, yes.
It's either 1, 2, 3 times a year, depending upon
Yeah.
the bond.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very good. And I did notice, though, on good old page 2 there, the economic development line there, commission expenses, 5,800 last month. Did they have a party? Did they? Because if so, I'm mad for 2 reasons. One, I was not invited, and 2, I don't even know who the band was. But I want to say that I don't mind if that line goes over, because if it produces good results, that's money well spent.
Absolutely true. Yep.
So, very good. I'm glad they're doing things.
Well, yeah, things are being done to support many businesses in town that are coming on the green
I know.
this
It's a
Saturday.
big event on the 23rd.
So,
Hope the whole town shows up.
hope it doesn't rain.
Okay.
Okay. Michael, is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Unfortunately, we did not have a special funds this month. We do have a report from the Board of Ed. And I'm sorry, if you read the report,
Yep.
I think most of us know that we had a changeover in the finance office there, and Mr. Christian Strickland has now taken over, and I'm guessing with the changeover, he was also not able to produce the special funds reports, for the reserve accounts, I should say.
Don't those come from the finance department?
That's what it said. I thought they came from them. Where do those come from, Ingrid?
The Board of Ed?
No,
Well,
no,
he wrote in
the
his.
special funds.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupt. He wrote in his report that they came from the town. I didn't think they did,
No,
no?
they don't.
Right.
Yeah, he was confused.
Okay,
It's
right.
training.
That's, training, is that what that?
Right, he's new, he's,
Yeah, I thought they were produced over there too.
yeah, they are producing the board. Anyways.
But these are on the town books. These are the special ed, capital, and medical reserves.
Right, we send him the reports, but they consolidate the reports over there and they make the reports.
Okay, I was always led to believe that they came from the finance department, which is why when Mr. Swinkowski passed away, we couldn't get those reports for several months. Okay. I just had one question, and it kind of ties together the two things, which is the Ridge Road roof, where they're mentioning the repairs were paid from the remaining grant funding. And again, I think we discussed this last month, that I believe somewhere around 80% of the grants received from the Board of Ed in the last fiscal year, I believe, were actually spent. And I think they have to, once everything, all the bills are paid, whatever is left over from the grants, I think they have to return. But I guess what I'm trying to understand is the list that we received from the Board of Education of requests, high-priority capital projects, could any of those be paid for using grants? And again, this is the time that it would be really helpful to have somebody from the Board of Ed here. But it just seemed to me when I read that particular line item about the Ridge Road roof, where they were able to make emergency repairs to the roof using remaining grant funding, it made me think about all of these other capital requests that are being made in which they're using effectively the taxpayers' money, which is the surplus from last year's Board of Education budget. So,
Unfortunately, I'm guessing no one here has the answer to your question, that's my guess.
Well, there's certain grants that have criteria. If the Board of Ed has a grant and remaining money, what they would normally do is look at the criteria for the grant. If they come to a conclusion that they can do a repair on the Ridge Road roof and it ties into the criteria of the grant, then they do it. Now, not every grant may have the ability to do this. Now, that's the general overview on how the grants work over at the Board of Ed. There are multi-faceted components to the grant in terms of the utilization of the money. This may very well be something that they tied into some remaining funds.
it seems like they were also able to use the grant funding for this elementary school fire alarm systems. So, which seems like kind of a safety issue. And we also have a bonded safety program, so.
It says they're going to be paid from remaining grant funding.
Yes, no, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. So again, this is a second item that seems to be kind of a capital request that they're using grant money for, and then they've provided us with this list of 8 capital requests that would be paid for using the money in Fund 373. So.
Okay, any final comments on the Board of Ed report?
For an interim officer to make this report, I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah. You could have gotten nothing.
Exactly.
So,
All right, I'll
yeah.
take a motion on the reports then.
Make the motion.
Second, please.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Item 4, we talked about, but I will cover it briefly, then we'll have a discussion, if any. I think we've already heard about the fact that the Board of Ed last month informed this board via their report that they intended to ask for a transfer of $441,035.45 into the non-lapsing fund that was created via MOU last year. We do have a one-page document in front of us that came from Ron Bathrick, the chairperson. The Board of Ed did approve these dollars at their August 10th meeting. That's right. There were some restrictions on the amount of dollars that could be moved into the fund. It's addressed here, so for the public's benefit, that $441,000 plus dollars represents 0.7% of last year's budget. It cannot exceed 2% in any one year. We have also asked them to give us a good faith understanding of where the dollars are. That's listed here. Nancy just referenced the first portion, which is $187,700. It's a series of capital items. I won't read them all, but just to give the people at home and here an understanding or an idea. Replace the ropes course at the high school for $20,000. There's sidewalks at both Green Acres and Montoise. There are some chairs that need to be replaced. Clear touch TVs. Now, item is $85,000. So the sum total of those is $187,700. There's another $100,000 earmarked for special education legal fees. There was another $117,080 to support 2 paraprofessionals at the school system and a registered behavior technician to support the ILS classroom. That would leave, by the way, an amount of $36,255 in the fund. Again, finally, just to sort of wrap up my summation, the Board of Ed will give us monthly a report of the dollars expended. This is a good faith, which means that they do have the right to deviate from this report they gave us, but I take with faith that everything they gave us here is what they intend to do with the dollars. So we will eventually need a motion on this, but, well, I'll ask if there's any conversation or discussion on the first.
I just have a quick question about point number 2, which is appropriating a portion of this $441,000 to special education legal fees, because I was led to believe that we could not make any transfers to either special ed or to medical and dental, but only to this 373 account.
It doesn't say here that they're putting it into another account. What they're saying here is that that the money in this account could potentially be spent on special education legal fees.
I see. So even though this is technically a capital fund,
It's not a capital fund. It's a non-lapsing fund. In fact, you may remember that at one point, there was a capital fund. In fact, I've actually asked this question of Rich and Ingrid, and it was agreed between Howard, I'd say Howard and I, just to make the conversation easier, that there was no point in having multiple funds. Any dollars in that fund would just be collapsed into this one, because there was no restriction per se on whether this could be used for capital or other items.
so this could be transferred to supplement existing budget line items and/or supplement other special funds. Is that what you're saying? It could, they in turn could transfer it once we transfer it into that non-lapsing fund.
I've never looked at it in terms of transfers. It's money to be expended by the BOE.
Sir, I don't have a copy of the memorandum of understanding
I
with
do.
me at the
I
moment.
have it right here if you want.
Yeah, well, very briefly, are there any limitations as to the purposes for which these funds could be allocated or repurposed?
I will skim this quickly, but it's not my recollection that there was any.
I don't recall that either.
I'd like to read it.
Well, they know what their financial needs are, and so I would defer to their, to this request.
For purposes of this memorandum of understanding, the definition of unexpended funds will not include funds transferred utilizing the standard BOE transfer and/or expenditure process between accounts on the BOE operating budget or to the BOE Medical and Special Education Reserve Funds on the town's books. So that's how they're defining special, unexpended funds.
All right, any other questions on this particular item?
I believe that this notice is detailed enough for us to have a very good understanding of what they want to do.
All right, then I ask for a motion, please.
Make a motion.
I'm assuming the motion is that we approve the movement of $441,035.45 into the non-lapsing fund, Fund 373.
Correct.
Any further conversation?
Very well said.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the formal agenda. It is time for public comment. Any members of our audience care to speak, ask questions? Yes, sir.
Bill Piper, 28 Bassett Road, and I'm also the second selectman. I just wanted to point out that the memorandum of understanding quotes Connecticut General Statutes 10-248A, and I have, just for, maybe again for the board's purposes tonight, I actually have a copy of it by chance tonight, and it indicates may deposit into a non-lapsing account any unexpended funds from the prior fiscal year from the budgeted appropriation for education for the town, provided such deposit amount does not exceed 2%, the total budgeted appropriation for education for such prior fiscal year, and each expenditure from such account shall be made only for educational purposes. And then number 3, each such expenditure shall be authorized by the local Board of Education for such town. So that's the statute that's referenced in the memorandum of understanding, and that's what the statute says. So I think it's in keeping with what they've asked us to do. And I think it bears on the question about special education and whether they can use that, because that seems clearly for educational purposes under item number 2 there, based on what they've requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Piper. Anyone else? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.